All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to the show with no intro. Again, I'm just going to keep saying this over and over until I get the motivation to actually do something about it. And again, it's not because I'm lazy. I've told you this enough, so we're not going to have to cover that again today. I don't want to waste your precious time nor mine discussing things that have already been said. So let's move on. I spend a lot of time talking in this podcast about compassion, right? Compassion directed towards people other than us and directed back towards ourselves, right? And I truly do believe that the act of compassion, right? When we can make compassion an automatic emotional response, which happens through just repetitive practice, right? There's no mystery there, right? It's just the more you practice it, the more that, eventually it becomes what we call an emotional response, which means that it's the automatic thing that you do, right? Like as soon as you experience something, compassion flows, right? And I truly do believe that that could be the most important thing that we can, one of the most important skills that we can possess, right? And for a lot of reasons, which I've talked about here, right? So let's, we'll talk about that some more later on. But today, what I want to talk about is that there's a kind of sort of subtle but yet significant difference between what we call between compassion and what we call loving kindness. Okay. And so today I want to talk about what loving kindness is all about. All right. Now, it's not the first time I've talked about it, but it's been a minute. So I think it's time we discuss this. Okay. So when we talk about mindfulness, right, practicing mindfulness, right, it's about paying attention to what's happening, right? But it's about doing so with non-judgment, right? And that non-judgment and the sort of grounding into the present moment, right? And doing that, grounding ourselves into the present moment with non-judging awareness, right? There's a softness to that, right? There's a sort of, a gentle quality to the way that we practice mindfulness, right? So in other words, it's not mindfulness if you're paying attention to what's happening, but you're doing so and you're hard and enraged by what's happening, right? That's not mindfulness. That's kind of getting that's kind of getting away with your emotions, right? Mindfulness is about that kindness, right? It's about the ability to to look at the world around you and yourself and all the different people and all different animals and everything that's happening around you, and look at it with an active level of kindness, right? Because we know that kindness is, well, first of all, I mean, there's a lot of scientific basis to this, right? Dan Siegel, Dr. Dan Siegel, who's been working for 15 years or something like that on what he calls mindsight, right? Which is kind of like mindfulness. It's a little bit different, but it's very similar. And in his work, in his work of mindsight, Dr. Siegel talks about open awareness, which is also part of mindfulness, focused attention, which is also part of mindfulness, and kind intention, which is also part of mindfulness. But in mindfulness, we call it loving kindness, right? Which is just the sense that all things being equal, right? I can be kind to the rest of the world, right? I can approach the world with a level of kindness in my heart that again is good for me and is also good for you, right? Like there's no downside to kindness. There really isn't, right? And now in the next segment, we're going to go through like maybe some potential, we're going to discuss this a little bit more in the next segment. But for now, you know, I want to kind of, it's the idea of kindness, and again, it's an active kindness. It's not just kindness when we get the opportunity to show kindness, right? It's not about, just picking up somebody's, helping somebody with something they're carrying, right? Or holding a door open for somebody, or simply, doing nice things, right? It's not about being nice, right? Kindness and nice are not exactly the same, right? Now, of course, kindness sort of envelops nice, right? But the thing about being nice is, again, that's only when we have the opportunity to be nice, right? Which means that, when we feel inspired to be nice, right? When it occurs to us to be nice, and when we want to, kind of do those things that are nice. And again, the difference between being nice and compassion, because now these starts to sound pretty similar, right? Like when I notice somebody suffering, compassion is that drive to help them and relieve their suffering in some way, right? Which also includes nice within it, right? But nice is not necessarily, the same thing as compassion, certainly. But the thing about nice is that in many cases, I think we become nice because of how it makes us feel to be nice, right? Not so much that we're thinking about the world around us and how we're impacting the world around us, but instead we think about, well, if I'm nice, what do I get for being nice, right? Like, what's my reward? What's my advantage in this life for being nice, right? And now, of course, here's the thing, right? Like, when we're not nice, right? If we go through the our lives thinking that, okay, I can be nice and I'll get something in return, well, then we also think that we get something in return for being mean, right? That there's some sort of transaction there as well. But the fact of the matter is that neither of those things is appropriate, right? Like we're not looking to get something from being mean, and we're not looking to get something from being nice, or that's not what kindness is, right? And that's not what compassion is either. But today we're talking about kindness. So kindness, again, is an attitude that we practice or that we develop. We develop the attitude through the practices, right? And as we do that, right, as we develop this attitude of kindness, right, then again, kindness becomes sort of our mode of operation, right? It becomes just the way that we conduct ourselves, the way that we carry ourselves through our lives, right? So the Dalai Lama has a wonderful quote that says, "Whenever possible, be kind. It's always possible," right? And this is a very, very significant, statement, right? And what's so significant about this statement is that the delusion that we have, right, is that sometimes maybe it's appropriate to not be kind, right? Maybe somebody doesn't deserve my kindness. Maybe in order to get what I want, I have to be mean to that person, right? And again, it's not just people. It's also, we can be loving and kind to or we can practice loving kindness towards animals. We can practice loving kindness towards bugs on the ground. And I mean, I met somebody a few years ago who said he was I forget the term he used, but it was something like an almost Buddha or something like that. And he says it means that I'm like down with all the mindfulness and all that stuff, but I'll still step on a bug. And I get what he's saying, but that's again, that's the whole thing. You've heard stories about, most people have heard stories about the fact that Buddhas will, Buddhist monks, they will literally stop a car because a beetle is crawling across the road, right? Now, of course, that's taking it to a very, very high degree, right? And in our modern society, maybe that's not really attainable, right? But it can be attainable, at least personally, right? So maybe you're not going to, slam on your brakes and potentially cause an accident to other humans and other animals that are around you just to avoid, running over a beetle, right? Like a Buddhist monk might do. But if you're walking down the sidewalk and you notice the beetle, loving kindness says, well, I can easily step to the side of the beetle rather than stepping on the beetle, right? And why not? Right? And again, it's not compassion at that point, right? Because the beetle's not suffering necessarily. I mean, we don't know if he's suffering, right? Or she, right? Or it. I don't know if beetles even have genders, or maybe they're asexual or androgynous. I don't know. But the idea though is that, right, and the beetle is just one example, right? That kindness is not even just about the Beatles, right? It's about the Beatles. All you need is love, right? That was a good one. But it's not about the Beatles or the bugs or the animals or the people. It's about all of that, right? Kindness is something that we can, bring into our existence as just, again, a sort of quality with which we approach life. And this is something that is, yes, very, very good, because like I say, it's not even just all those things that I named, like the living sentient creatures, but it's also being kind to your phone chargers or your headphone chargers, or being kind to a book that you care about, right? Or being kind to plants, which those are still living, right? But even being kind to the inanimate objects around us, right? This cultivates a level of kindness towards everything, which of course includes us, because we're part of everything, right? And so the kindness, again, it also becomes, not only is it something good for us to practice in terms of the integration that we will derive from this, in terms of it's going to benefit your biological functioning in terms of your heart and your lungs and your nervous system and your immune system. All of these things are going to benefit from the practice of being kind, because again, part of the beauty of all these practices, right, is that as soon as I set the intention to be kind, I'm already practicing mindfulness, right? I'm already grounding myself in the present moment, because we don't ever think about, oh, okay, I'll be kind to that person, that thing, whatever, in 2 hours from now, right? When I get around to it, I'll be kind. No, we're kind. Either we're kind or we're not kind, right? So when and it's a now thing, right? So when we contemplate, or when we notice that we're maybe not being kind, that is a moment of mindfulness. And the more of those moments we have, the more we string them sort of together to the point where we're just always behaving and operating from that place of mindfulness, which includes kindness. Right. And so then not only is it good for our own bodies, right? But then, of course, the sort of resonance that we're going to get from, if you want to take it to like a woo-woo level, you can say the resonance we're going to get from the universe. Right? If we put kindness in, we're going to get kindness back. Now, of course, this is not a zero-sum proposition, right? I mean, I try to be very kind all the time. And it was just not too long ago that I saw somebody looking at me on the street like he looked like he wanted to hurt me, and looked like he was going to rob me. He didn't rob me. Maybe that is part of my kindness that made him pick somebody else or something like that. But this was a moment of like, wow, this person is me. He means me harm. Like, I could tell. And I grew up in New York City, so I know that feeling. I'm very practiced at that awareness, right? And so I have no question that that was the case. There's been other things where, riding my bike or driving my car, I have people flip me off all the time. I have, online, I have, if I make a statement in a public forum kind of thing, I have people calling me an effing idiot and all this kind of stuff. It happens all the time, right? So it's not that but again, that's the point, right? We're not being kind because the universe is going to give us kindness back. Right? We're just being kind just for the sake of being kind, right? It's like an apple tree, right? An apple tree just grows apples. It doesn't know whether those apples are going to fall to the ground and rot, or they're going to fall to the ground and be eaten by animals, or they're going to be picked by people, wearing, colorful sweaters and giggling with their kids and stuff, right? And furthermore, they don't know what happens to the apples after that, right? Like there's who knows? But that doesn't matter. The apple tree grows the apples because that's what the apple tree does, right? And so we humans can grow. We can grow our kindness just because that's what we do, right? And this is going to ultimately result in a lot of, again, we're not looking for the results, but the results will come. And that's the beautiful thing about all these practices. All right, everybody, I wish you well. I will be back again in just a minute for the next segment. Take care. All right, welcome back, everybody, for segment number 2 here on October 2nd. By the way, yesterday, I don't know if you realize this, but yesterday I turned out a segment, a full episode in one segment, and I didn't have my stopwatch, and I hit it at I think it was 33 minutes, which hot dang, that ain't bad, So I'm using the timer today. I don't know. I kind of go back and forth. It's really interesting to me. But anyway, it's a little glimpse behind the curtain here for you. It's not much of a curtain. Anyway, so in the last segment we talked about what loving kindness is, and so in this segment I want to talk about when loving kindness is not appropriate. Okay, and really this could be the shortest segment ever because I could just say never and stop it. But I'm not going to do that to you. We're going to expand on that idea a little bit here. So again, last segment, I think I mentioned the Dalai Lama quote, which is a very powerful quote that says, whenever possible, be kind. It's always possible, right? Now, in the past, I would have argued that. I would have said, nope. I don't believe that. I would have said there are definitely times in which kindness is going to be a detriment. There are definitely times in which being mean or hard is going to produce better results than being kind. I would have said that. And so, as I look back on my life with from a position of mindfulness and compassion and self-compassion, right, I'm able to really open myself up to a lot of memories. And this is something that really is pretty amazing that we can, as we practice mindfulness, and again, self-compassion is a big, big part of this. But as we practice these things, we get to a place where we can, because we're kind of turning down the static and the squelch, if you will, like an old CB radio, right? You're turning up and down the squelch to get a clean signal, right? And as soon as we can practice and gain that clean signal, that's when we start to see things a little more clearly, and those things include our memories. And the other really important part of this is that as we practice our non-judging awareness, right, and our self-compassion, then we're able to see those memories a little bit more accurately, I believe, right? Because as we know, or I've told you this a few times, I think, that our memories are not it's not some computer file, right? That you go and you go into your Finder and you find that file and double click it and it opens up and it's the same as it's ever been, right? That's what happens in a computer file. That's what maybe even happens in a printed book, right? I can always go back to this book on my bookshelf. 15 years from now, I can go back and the words are not going to change, right? And so that's sort of our outside world that we're used to. And so we have this tendency to believe that our memories act in that kind of way, but they do not act in that kind of way at all. And that's why, really it's a very true statement to say that the past doesn't exist, because every time you remember a circumstance in your life, you're actually changing your memory slightly, right? And you're going to change that memory based on your here and now feelings and how you're going to color that memory in the here and now. So it is my hypothesis, and I mean, you know what, I'm going to make a note to ask Dan that on Thursday. I'm seeing Dan Siegel, not this Thursday, next Thursday. I'm seeing him and get to ask him a question. I think this is the question I'm going to ask him is, would mindfulness allow that sort of impact of how we change our memory, right, based on our current experience, right? How does that change with mindfulness? I believe that it's going to be significantly, right? Because again, mindfulness is about, dwelling in a non-judging awareness that includes a kindness and a softness, right? That is neutral, right? It's not, we're not negative or positive. We're just accepting it all without labeling it. And so I wonder that if somebody practices mindfulness very often, that non-judging awareness that we develop as a matter of operating system, if you will, how does that change the way? So in other words, would me, as somebody who's been practicing mindfulness for about 10 years now, would I change my memories less based on my coloring of my emotions that are happening right now than somebody else would who does not practice mindfulness? I'm really fascinated, and I believe that would have. I believe that there's going to be. I don't know if Dan will have an answer for it, but I think you'll find it interesting, and I wouldn't be surprised if we found that was the case, right? That as I look back on my memories with this sort of neutral grounding, then I am going to see them a little bit more objectively and therefore a little bit more clearly. All that aside, right? I just thought that was an interesting thing. But the point is, though, that being in mindfulness and self-compassion is a huge part of this, right? It allows us to see the memories a little bit more comfortably. Like, we're not afraid of the memories. We're not disturbed by the memories. We're not, shy about the memories, right? We're able to allow the memories to arise and allow ourselves to experience the memory, right? From the safety of the present moment with self-compassion, right? And this is key for people with trauma. And that's why all the experts on trauma agree that mindfulness and self-compassion are huge assets to the healing of trauma. But anyway, this all to say that I've been searching recently for times in my life in which being kind served as a disadvantage. And again, knowing that memory is not perfect and knowing that there might be things that I just can't remember, okay, I'll believe that, but I cannot find a single circumstance. And yes, I have a confirmation bias just like everybody else does. However, we know that practicing mindfulness does decrease and does lessen the strength of implicit biases. That has been studied. Okay, so I know that my confirmation bias is lower, possibly zero, than it could be, right? Because of the practice I've done, not because I'm better than anybody, not because I'm special in any way. It's just because of the practice I've done. I am special, of course, but it's not, and so are you. It's not because of that I do this. It's just because of the practice, right? And so I have been searching, especially over the last few days. I've been really trying to find instances, just one time, where it benefited me to be unkind. Now, let's be careful here, and let's be very clear on something here, right? I can be strict and not be unkind, right? And in a way, but by the way, while I can't remember one single instance in which being unkind benefited me in some way, I can list for you hundreds of instances in which being unkind was a great disadvantage to me in a circumstance. Like, that is easy. Like, I can find those with no problem at all, right? And so here's the thing, right? And again, this is something that I would have argued. I said that in the last segment. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I said, no, you're wrong. Like, there are plenty of times where it's better to be, angry. It's better to be, mean and hard on somebody. Don't be soft. Don't be kind. Definitely. But it's not, I don't believe that's true. And the thing is that, you could say, like, well, and I was just thinking about this morning, like just trying to come up with some instance in which being unkind was a positive attribute, right? And Donald Trump came to mind. Right? And Donald Trump came to my mind because let's be honest. I mean, whatever your political beliefs are about Donald Trump, and I'm not getting into that. Like, quite frankly, I'm not a fan of either party, right? And I don't think either of them are quite honest or quite effective as they should be. But that's political beliefs are not really what we're talking about here, right? I'm just talking about just neutrally looking at Donald Trump and his career, right? Obviously, no matter what you believe about him, obviously he has done very well in his life, right? He was elected to, he's only one of 45 guys who's been in that job of the president, and he was very successful before that, right? Despite the fact that most of that money came from his father and all that stuff. Like, we don't need to talk about that, but clearly he's had success in his life, right? That is undeniable, right? Whether he might have had more or less, that is debatable, but he has had plenty of success in his life. And it's also clear that he's not a kind person, right? Which is, and I'm sure he would be the first person to tell you that. So it's not an insult. But here's the thing, right? I'm not saying that you can't survive your life being unkind. You can, right? You can, I mean, again, you could rise to a very successful position. But the point is, it's not because he was unkind that he got to that position. And now, again, as I thought through this, I say, well, what about when he announced his candidacy, and he in the lobby of Trump Tower, he talked about the people from Mexico who are rapists and drug dealers and murderers and all this, which of course we know is completely not true, right? But it's also a very unkind thing to say, and yet he was elected president. So could we say that well, you see, he was unkind and he became president anyway, so therefore it helped him? But I don't believe that's the truth, right? And that's an important aspect to this, right? Because when we commit and intend to being kind, right, then that becomes kind of the parameters through which we live our lives, right? In other words, we will always find a way to do something that might result in the same thing, but be done with kindness instead of with meanness or anger or whatever you want to call it, right? However you want to attribute that, right? And so let me give you an example that kind of came to my mind, right? Like, Donald Trump could have been up there and said, in my first 100 days, if I'm elected, in my first 100 days, I'm committing to a comprehensive. We're gonna form a council, and then we're gonna do a comprehensive study on exactly the kind of people who are coming up from Mexico and exactly how they're impacting our jobs here. Because we hear all this stuff about it, and we're gonna commit to doing a full study, because my belief is that they are taking your jobs, and if I find that to be true, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to do this kind of stuff, right? You would have spoken to the same emotion in the people that he was speaking to by being mean, right? Because they would still say, okay, this guy's going to do something about that stuff that I hate, right? But he's saying it in a way that did not have any unkindness in it, right? I mean, it didn't have kindness either, but it was maybe neutral, right? And of course he could add kindness to it. He could tweak it and speech writers and stuff like that, right? But the point is that it is always possible to accomplish anything with kindness, just like the Dalai Lama says, right? It's always possible. It's never going to be a detriment to you to be kind. Even if you're yelling at somebody, you can be kind of course, that's a little tricky, but it's not it's not impossible. And the point of this is that, again, it drives us back towards mindfulness, right? Because if I commit to being kind, and then when I'm standing there in front of a group of people who I know I need to appeal to their anger about something, well, I can find a way that's not either A or B. I can find the third way to do things. And there's always a third way, right? Life is not black or white, up or down, yes or no, dry or wet. Life is damp. Life is gray. Life is maybe. Life is kinda. Life is very nuanced. And there's always different ways to approach any given situation. And so, yeah, it's not that being unkind is destining you to a life of misery. Actually, I believe that's true, because I think we can all agree too that despite all of Donald Trump's successes, I don't think we can call him a happy person. And I think in all honesty, I think he probably does feel a lot of misery. I mean, the kind of misery that's easy, it's maybe hard to hang on to because he poop on a golden toilet, I mean, how much misery can you really have, but I think there is a heaviness in his heart. I think that's for sure. And I think also that he sees love as transactional, and that's also something that's probably very damaging to him in ways that he doesn't even know it, right? But anyway, my point was that it's not so much about the misery, but it's not to be unkind does not destine you to a life of failure. Let's put it that way. Right? So it's not, and it's the same thing. Like, you can live your life with a wandering mind throughout your whole life, right? Like you can live with this, ability to, or inability to focus, right? And you'll survive. You could be very successful that way. I mean, there's people who are very non-mindful who are extraordinarily successful in their work or whatever. Are they comfortable? Could they be more successful with mindfulness? Yes, I think so. Are they comfortable? I doubt it, right? Are they damaging their body? Probably. By the stress that comes from the wandering mind and everything like that, right? Are they treating people in a way that they're not intentional about? In all likelihood, yes. And would that all benefit them to look at that and be more intentional? 100%, yes, it would. But that doesn't mean that they can't live a life without it, right? And so that's not the point here. The point here is, just like Sharon Salzberg says, we don't meditate and practice mindfulness to get better at practicing mindfulness. We meditate to get better at life, because it does make us better at life. It makes us more capable. It optimizes us for doing things in the present moment, which is where everything happens. And that's what we're going to talk about next time. All right, everybody, have a great day. I wish you well. I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care.